Do I need to pick law as an A-level subject if I want to study law at university? Should I pick subjects with an essay component if I'm going to be writing lots of essays at university? What about the sciences? If I pick a lot of science subjects in my A-levels, is that going to count against me in my application to get into law school? Hi, my name is Alan Greene. I'm a reader in constitutional law and human rights at Birmingham Law School. I have over 15 years of experience working in UK Russell Group universities and in Irish universities. I've also had some experience in the admissions process, so I'm going to give some views in terms of what I think you should consider when figuring what A levels you think you should pick if you want to study law in university. Now, these views are my own personal views. I would strongly advise you to listen to the guidance given to you by your career counsellors and by your teachers and prioritise that advice. This is based upon my own experience working in these universities. I've never had to sit on interview panels for students for admissions, and I've never gone for an admissions interview myself. So if you are thinking at looking at institutions that do have an interview component, there might be different considerations that I'm not going to be able to cover in this video. So firstly, do you need to study law? Well, the straightforward answer to that is no, you don't. Most law degrees in the UK are structured in such a way that we assume that you have absolutely no background legal knowledge whatsoever. We teach from scratch. And you'll see that most degrees are structured in such a way that your first year you're going to be doing mostly compulsory, if not all compulsory subjects. And those compulsory subjects will cover a lot of the core material that you're going to need to complete a law degree. Likewise, in second year, you will probably have a lot of compulsory modules. Again, maybe a bit more flexibility. And then going into final year, you might have a bit more flexibility then again, where you can pick more optional subjects. You'll also see that most law degrees will have built in a legal skills, a legal writing, a legal research component. And that is designed again to give you not just the knowledge, but the skills necessary to complete a law degree. But that said, if you are interested in studying law at university, chances are that you're going to be interested in studying law as an A level. And that brings me to my key advice, the key principle that I think you should follow when figuring out what A levels you should pick. And that's to pick what you're interested in. That might sound obvious, but pick what you're interested in rather than what you think admissions selectors are interested in. By picking what you're interested in, chances are you're going to be much more willing to study this, to put in the long hard hours that are needed to get the highest grades in that subject. And good grades are the most likely indicator in terms of whether you're going to be offered a place at a university or not. So pick what you're interested in. You might think that some subjects will look bad in a personal statement. I don't think, personally speaking, that that's actually the case. Rather, what you need to do in your personal statement is to demonstrate some of the key transferable skills that your interest in that module may have. Very often students in personal statements think that there is some ideal law student out there. They have a picture in their head of what a law student looks like, and they try and make themselves look like that ideal type law students as much as possible. In fact, the key to a personal statement is that it's personal. It's about you. And there are lots of ways in which you can demonstrate certain skills, certain interests, certain strengths that you might want to show in a personal statement. It might just need a bit more thinking, a bit more lateral thinking. Likewise, if you've picked law, it's not really enough in a personal statement to say that I picked law, give me a place in law school. Rather, you would have to do a bit more work to show how your picking law has demonstrated your interest in that subject and in turn piqued your interest in wanting to study it at a university. It's also important to remember that law is an incredibly flexible degree. There are lots of different career trajectories which you could go down. Studying law doesn't mean that you have to be a solicitor or a barrister. And this means that a law degree can potentially open pathways to lots of different careers where those other interests that you may have may align. And so this brings me to my next point about the sciences and mathematics. So would picking science or mathematics count against you in terms of your application to law school? Again, you need to pick the subjects that you're most interested in. If you're interested in the sciences, you think you're going to score highly in the sciences, then by all means I think you should go ahead and pick those subjects. Again, there will be some transferable skills within those subjects. For example, things like problem solving, logic. Those are skills that you would develop in some of the sciences that are transferable. From my own personal experience, I studied chemistry in Ireland in part of my leaving cert, and that I might be showing my age here, but that involved quite a lot of rote learning off a lot of different kinds of ionic bonds and covalent bonds and different formulae, etc. Likewise, I studied physics, and physics was all about learning certain different formulae. Mathematics in Ireland is almost compulsory, and so you're learning all these different proofs off by heart. And that kind of memory learning, that rote learning, was quite helpful for me when I went to law school, and it involved a lot of learning case names off by heart that I needed to know when I went into an exam. Now, things might be a little bit different now in terms of how we assess, and it's not very much in-person exams, but we might be going back to that in future, or certain universities might end up going back to that in future because of the risk of AI. If you're interested in how AI is affecting legal education, I've recorded a video where I mark an essay generated by ChatGPT that you might have interest in. But again, because law is relevant to lots of different areas and there are lots of different careers open to you, a background in science could potentially be married with a background in law. So for example, a lot of areas of interest at the minute in terms of research and development are in things like law and health. We only need to think back a couple of years to the pandemic to get a concrete example of how law and health impacted upon all our lives. So you can easily see how a background in biology could be helpful in that field. Likewise, law and technology could build upon things that you might learn in physics. Intellectual property law could potentially build upon things that you learn in chemistry. So again, there is a potential way in which these two interests that you have may align in terms of a future career direction. Likewise, mathematics can be very helpful in areas like accountancy and business, and it should be quite clear how that aligns with law, particularly things like commercial law, if that is a route that you're interested in going down. You might think that maybe you need to pick a subject with an essay component. Now, certainly this can be a factor that you can take into account. And I can see how if you have done essays at A level, those are transferable skills that you can bring with you into a law degree. So by all means, if you think that's important to you, then go for it. But again, I'd like to reassure you that if you don't go down that route, as part of a law degree, you are going to get training, you are going to get advice from your lecturers, from your teachers, as to how to write an essay. We don't give you an essay question and say, go off and write it, good luck. We give you some guidance, we give you some help. And throughout your degree, as you progress, you will see that your essay writing improves. So certainly it can be a help, but it's not the end of the world if you don't have that background in essay writing. We help you. Again, the key rule is picking what you're interested in, and certainly a lot of the essay heavy subjects could be in areas that are relevant to law, and there would be transferable skills there. So English literature, for example, is all about interpretation, and law is all about interpretation too. So there would be an overlap there. Likewise, in my area of law, which is constitutional law, subjects like history and politics are going to potentially be of help to you. Again, I teach from a blank slate. I teach on the basis that you have no background knowledge in this area. So it's not going to be fatal at all for you if you haven't studied history or politics. Again, subjects like philosophy could be helpful. They would be relevant to areas like legal theory or areas like human rights. Again, the key rule is if you're interested in it, go for it. So as I mentioned, if you come to law school, you will be given some guidance in terms of how to write essays. I've previously recorded a video containing the advice that I give my students with regards to how to write an essay in law school. If you're interested in seeing what that advice looks like, you can click on the video link on the screen now.